Let's podcast alongside Joe Giglio. I'm Joe Ovies. Cafecito time, Joe. Got that Heat culture. Let's go. 305, baby. Dale. Casual Heat fan is on one right now, man. Casual Heat fan is absolutely loving the moment as they avoided history and knocked off the Boston Celtics after they had a 3-0 lead. I did not like the way that this was positioned, as though the Celtics were some plucky team going up against the big bad machine that was the Yankees. TNT had interviewed they had interviewed Pedro Martinez in the pregame to kind of like tie these things together. Y'all, it wasn't the same thing. This is a Celtics team with some dudes, the number 2 seed that lost the series and was down 3-0 to a team that almost didn't even get out of the play-in game, Joe. These are not the same things, and yet Boston continuously wants to be positioned as though there's some plucky upstart that never gets any sort of breaks. Nah, y'all, you've been winning championships. You got by the Heat again. The Heat against Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown in the playoffs are 11-9 against this group. It's pretty impressive, man.
Yeah, only Boston can pull the Jedi mind trick that they're one of the best teams in the NBA and somehow an underdog to the number 8 seed and a team with 5 guys who regularly contribute who weren't drafted. So yes, there's a lot of cockamamie. You know, it's funny. I was actually thinking about it yesterday because remember, I was longing for the overarching picture for hockey. Right. I feel like hockey coverage is so granular that I was like, man, just give me a little bit of a storyline here, please. And then I'm watching ESPN's run up to the game last night and be like, is this the greatest comeback in sports history? And people are like, well, you know, LeBron coming back from 3-1 against a team that won 73 games is still really impressive, much to, you know, Brian Windhorst and the rest of the crew's credit. They did say that. But I was like, wait a second. They haven't completed the task yet.
No.
And I get it. You know, you got the Red Sox story. You got Tommy Brady coming back from 28-3. And, you know, they were all ready to crown themselves the comeback city. I'm sure they still will, no matter what. And you know how much I hate Boston and their fans. But the truth of the matter is, I just don't think there's that much of a difference between all of these teams. And I said it at the beginning of the tournament in the NBA. I felt like there were 15 teams that could win the thing. Whoever was playing Denver in the first round, I thought had no shot. And Milwaukee, obviously, at full health was really good this year. But you look at it and you look back at it now, think about it. Miami lost their first playing game to Chicago and DeMar DeRozan. I just think we have this idea that we're still stuck in the NBA in 1998 and Michael Jordan is here and he's playing against Jeff Hornacek, who's here. Like the difference between Jason Tatum and Caleb Martin, it's like here on a regular basis.
Whoa.
Seriously.
Whoa.
Seriously.
Come on, hold on a second. I mean, there is clearly a difference between Caleb Martin, who was an undrafted free agent, spent some time in the G League, both with the Hornets and the Heat, and had to develop to get to this point. I mean, come on. I mean, there's a consistency factor that comes out of Jason Tatum since he's gotten to the league versus the journey of Caleb Martin. You can appreciate what Caleb Martin's been able to do, and we can get into that a little bit later. But I mean, come on, there's got to be a little bit more than just a skosh of difference, right?
No, but what I'm also getting at this, and somebody had stumped for Theo Pinson too recently, and they were saying how you guys don't understand how good you have to be in the NBA. Like,
okay, now
there
to that point, yes,
players in the NBA. So let me try to illustrate this a little bit better. In my opinion, Giannis is obviously called the Greek freak for a reason. There is a talent gap with Giannis and even whoever you think are the next 2 and 3 best players in the league, in my opinion. Okay. Just as there was with LeBron James. But it isn't this wide disparity that ESPN was trying to make it out last night because, they have Max Strus and they have Gabe Vincent and they have a bunch of guys that you've never heard of. And it's like, cool. They have one guy in Jimmy Butler who is a straight up dude, right?
Yeah.
And in my opinion, in this day and age, if you got one of those, you got something working for you. They have a Post and Bam Adebayo, who, in my opinion, one of the 50 best players in the NBA, certainly one of the 12 best posts, one of the 12 best bigs in the NBA. So it's not
offensively,
like
he was a mess last night.
He was, but this isn't FDU, Joe, hoping
Right.
to make a bunch of threes to beat you. This is a talented team with a coach who knows what he's doing. And I kind of laugh because you and I have been giving Eric Spoelstra his flowers. And sure, there was some strategy to last night, but a lot of last night was belief. And Boston got high on their own supply after winning 3 games. And they were not prepared to play basketball last night.
No, they
Lavelle
weren't.
Moten is a whole nother episode as to how Lavelle Moten is a Boston Celtics fan. We're going to have to get Bomani Jones to explain that one to me. I'm not quite prepared to do all of the mental gymnastics to connect all of those dots. Shouts to Lavelle. He was tweeting like going under screens. We're switching with the wrong guy. We being Boston, we're like basically doing all of the wrong things, taking bad shots. And it's like, yeah, you know who does that? Teams who thought they've already won the series because they won 3 straight games. So it was a fascinating illustration, and to my belief, that the difference between these teams is just not that great.
To your point about the Celtics played that game as though they had already won the series, it's easy to do when they won the game the way that they did in Game 6, right? I think it also kind of comes down to the way the Celtics have been
emotionally.
I think emotionally they
Okay.
I think emotionally they thought they won it. How we had this miracle at the end. They said that we needed 1 stop. They needed 2 actually. Didn't get it. We walk out of there. We're going back home. Let's make this thing happen. Like they probably felt that the Heat couldn't overcome that emotional letdown of having blown a 3-game series lead. And Jimmy Butler had it, or at least it looked like they had adjusted to make life a little bit more difficult for Jimmy Butler in those 2 games. Although I throw Game 4 out of it because Butler had 29 points in Game 4, but the Celtics won that game in a classic. We accused you of quitting. You have a bounce back game. This is going to be a gentleman's sweep. And they shot lights out. They were 18 of 45 from 3. Miami was only 8 of 32. And Miami turned the ball over a bunch of times. And then in Game 5, they made those defensive adjustments and made life miserable for Jimmy Butler. He only had 14 points. And then in Game 6, he had his worst shooting night of the entire playoff run. And they were looking like they were a little bit gassed. And I know that Jimmy Butler had a little bit of an ankle issue as well. And in the final, 2 minutes, he scores 10 points. And I thought they were going to wrap that thing up there. So maybe the Celtics thought we weathered this surge from Jimmy Butler and still found a way to win. Now we're going back. They got to be emotionally spent. You mentioned Bomani Jones. Bomani tweeted in the first 5 minutes of that game. The Miami Heat looked a little bit gassed. But again, the Heat have a way about them from Eric Spoelstra, from the we're not going to quit, we're going to hunker down kind of attitude. And they ended up making life miserable for the Celtics instead. They settled for jumpers. I mean, the Heat did a good job defensively, but you can't sit here and tell me that at a high-level NBA playoff game with the right to go to the NBA Finals, you're having trouble with the zone, which is what the Boston Celtics found themselves doing. And that to me just is comical. Like I expected to see that stuff in college, but like judicious use of the zone against the Celtics was something that was comical. And the Celtics continued to give the Heat exactly what they wanted by jacking up shots. And then when you throw in the turnovers, Jaylen Brown, who couldn't dribble the ball, it was a recipe for a fourth-quarter disaster the way it played out.
Which one of my cockamamie theories that are actually correct would you like me to go to? Which one would you like me to dial up?
What's behind door number
spin
1?
The wheel and
No. Let's go behind door number 1. What do we have in door number 1?
I'll let you spin the wheel and pick because you've heard me say a million times, die with your fastball, right?
Yeah.
Particularly in basketball, I want Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown taking every shot. Yet, who was there? Derek White was the one who actually showed up last night and tried to drag the Celtics into that game. When you get to this point in the NBA, particularly, and maybe we see it a little bit in hockey too, given that it's not Connor McDavid, it's not Austin Matthews winning these games in hockey, right? So you could probably apply it to a lot of different sports, maybe not the NFL because of the quarterback position. But in the NBA, when you get to this point, it's pretty much a given, right? That Jimmy Butler is going to score 30.
Yeah.
Right? Their best player is going to score 30. Cool. It's
Caleb
pretty
Love's
much
going
a
to score
given
26.
under
That's
normal circumstances.
It's a given that Caleb Love is going to shoot lights out. It's a given at this point.
Martin. Now you're getting
I'm sorry, Caleb Martin. I'm getting my Caleb's messed up now.
So it's pretty much a given that your stars are going to be equal for the best part. They're going to neutralize each other. So now it becomes the other guys. And to your point about how the Celtics adjusted to Jimmy Butler, the direct result of that is leaving somebody like Caleb Martin open because you're overplaying Butler, and rightfully so. He has been their best player. So it becomes, who of your other players can make shots? And, you and I talked about this during the bubble, in how those ancillary players usually struggle on the road in the playoffs. And at home, they play well. The other players are the ones who look good at home. They're usually younger. And then they get on the road and they struggle. So the bubble was fascinating to see how different players like a Caleb Martin would look, right?
Yeah.
So for him to have the game that he did last night, I'm not saying it wasn't an out-of-body experience. I'm just saying he's a talented player who's worked hard. And the league has changed to the point where he has come along at the right time. He's a perfect size for a 3-and-D. He shoots the three enough, shoots it well enough to be a 3-and-D. There wasn't a spot for him in the 80s and 90s NBA, but there is in the current NBA. And congratulations to him. Congratulations to his mom, who I met, oh my gosh, all these years ago, Jenny Bennett. I remember always struck by how young she was when she had them, but also she worked to support them and take care of them when they were growing up. And it's such a cool story to see them have this, not obviously before tonight, their longevity in the NBA, but for him to be the star of that game in the way that he was, and for the whole country to now know who exactly he is really cool.
Now, going down to Hialeah, I'm sure my dad busted out the pots and pans last night watching the Heat. He sent me a couple of, he sent me and my brother some selfies in his Miami Heat gear. But I think this is on 49th down in Hialeah, right across from the Pollo Tropical, which I think there was a follow-up video to this where somebody was shooting off fireworks over the Pollo Tropical. It doesn't get any more Hialeah than that, Joe. It really does not. But I put this on the screen if you're watching on YouTube, because this is kind of where we're at right now with the NBA Finals and the NHL Stanley Cup Final. You got these 2 8th seed Miami squads. If you thought Boston fans can be annoying with their plucky attitude, well, South Florida is about to take their street, and they're going to be absolutely obnoxious about this going forward. There's nothing more obnoxious than Heat culture people coming through on your social media timeline and telling you that there's no other franchise in the NBA that does it like we do. The Heat culture is all these types of things. And then meanwhile, you got the Florida Panthers headed off to the Stanley Cup Final after beating the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, I'll say this, and I'll close my thoughts on what these two things ultimately illustrate. It's a central point that I've been saying since the Canes were in the playoffs. Sports are stupid. Sports are stupid sometimes, and there's no way to predict the way that this Miami Heat team got to the finals. There was no way to predict that the Florida Panthers, who struggled to get into the playoff field to begin with and did not have Bobrovsky in net when they started this entire thing, finds themselves with the hottest goalie in the playoffs and a chance to win the whole thing. So we can make all the plans in the world, and you can have the best players and everything else, and sometimes things just get wonky, and ultimately, that's why we keep watching at the end of the day. So I hope you all are ready, because Miami fans are about to be obnoxious the next couple of weeks. Imagine if they win both, right? Because I think, what was it? It was the metro area argument. I think it was the San Jose Sharks and the Golden State Warriors a couple of years ago that were able to get it done in the same season.
Housekeeping. No, the Sharks never.
Well, I think the Sharks got to the finals, did they not? Was it like it was like
before we housekeep like though?
Yeah,
Before we housekeep, isn't it amazing that there are certain turns of phrases that just sound better in Spanish or a different language than English?
Yeah,
you said pollo tropical, right?
Pollo tropical, yes. Tropical chicken.
If I said the tropical chicken, like we were in Bayonne, you'd be like, what is tropical about chicken? But you say pollo, you're like, oh, well, that sounds pretty cool, actually.
I feel like the tropical chicken sounds like a competitor to the Bada Bing in Sopranos. Like that was something that Tony Soprano had to take care of some business against the guys who were running the tropical chicken. It was like a drug front. But Pollo Tropical is basically like the South Florida Chick-fil-A. And that's all it is. That's all Pollo Tropical is. I mean, you just want some basic home-cooked meals. That's what they have. Yeah, so housekeeping. We're going to be out at Raleigh Country Club tomorrow. It's going to be an interesting experiment in mobile broadcasting technology, Joe. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, UNC Health Championship, the Corn Ferry Tour, coming to the Donald Ross course in downtown Raleigh. I can't wait to see I saw some lines, some futures on the Corn Ferry Tour recently, Joe. We might have ourselves a rooting interest in this UNC Health Championship. We'll be out there tomorrow. That is actually the Pro-Am tomorrow, and then the tournament starts Thursday. There's a Canes night if you're a Canes season ticket holder. You go out there on Friday. Empire Eats is out there doing all of the catering, so get out there and get all the good stuff out at Raleigh Country Club.
If you're subscribed on our YouTube channel, highly recommend that you do. Shout out to everybody who has already subscribed to the YouTube channel. We do more than just, put the show and clips from the show. We've got some other stuff. There's playlists, including one called OG Overtime. And in that OG Overtime, you can see Giglio get disappointed by the fact that he opened up a $200 pack of cards with autographs in it, and it did not have the Victor Wembanyama card he's been after. But that Oak City Sports Cards little video where I even talk about Garbage Pail Kids is available on our YouTube channel right now. But have you gone back to try to open up another pack, Joe? You got another $200 lying around I'm not aware of? Because remember, you're in charge
it's funny. It's funny. I saw on YouTube yesterday, I was trying to go through and, you've SEO and hashtags and this and that. And I'm like, there's a lot of people looking for this Victor Wembanyama card. Then I started thinking, wait a second, there's only 100 of them. And then I thought about what Weston had told us. It's probably not in this pack.
Probably not. No, probably not in this one.
But I'll be honest with you. My disappointment wasn't that I didn't get the French Mamba. My disappointment was I wanted like somebody that I liked to be one of the autos. Brennan Armstrong is in that set. NC State's quarterback. There's a bunch of really good college players in that set. That Caleb Williams that I would have been like, oh, okay, cool. But instead, sometimes you get a lottery ticket that hits a winner, and sometimes you got to go back and get some more. But you can buy, sell, get your cards graded. More importantly, at Oak City Cards. It's oakcitycards.com.
Also, shout out to Breeze Through. They sponsor this YouTube podcast experience. The 919 Vice podcast went to Breeze Through, the one across from PNC Arena. They're on Edwards Mill Road and Trinity. That one, we got our gas station beers, Joe, and they've got a growler machine. It's a plastic growler. It's not a bottle one, so you don't have to worry about breaking it. And the growler machine is pretty tight as well. They were the last guests on the 919 Vice podcast. We got into the whole concept of the beer cave. Like, how did those come about? Like, who was the brilliant mind who came up with the beer cave? Because you and I both know the gas station beers and those refrigerators hit different. There are much colder fridges than what we do, and it just hits a little bit different when you crack that bad boy open, Joe.
Yeah, it's so cold. Locally owned neighborhood store, 1200 Edwards Mill Road, Breeze Through Markets. Go check them out for all of your drinks, not just the adult ones. Get yourself a Gatorade, get yourself some ice on your way to the beach. Also get yourself some really good dark roast coffee.
Move on.
It seems as though the SEC will not move on from an 8-game conference schedule, Joe. So we're a couple weeks removed from the ACC conference spring meetings.
Oh, don't you disappoint me right now, sir. Do not disappoint me right now.
The SEC meetings are in Destin, Florida. They start up today, and Greg Sankey has already done some media availability to the commissioner. And the big topic of conversation, beyond what to do with field stormings and field goal posts coming down, is 8 or 9 games as they get ready to go to a 16-team conference model. A lot of coaches, a lot of ADs want to stay at 8, but there's a television aspect to this, Joe, that people keep hammering the table on. And there's this weird game of chicken taking place between the SEC and ESPN because it's not in the contract. My understanding is, based on Ross Dellinger's reporting and Andy Staples' reporting, it's not in the contract that ESPN has to give the SEC more money if they go to a 9-game conference slate. So there are some ADs that would prefer easy home buys, a scheduled win so they can get to their bowl eligibility quicker. So this is what's going to take place across the SEC meetings this week. It's an interesting debate, to say the least.
Yeah, Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC, who added Texas and Oklahoma to get more inventory and bigger names in his conference to prepare for the 12-team format. Let's not forget.
Mm-hmm.
And negotiated a deal with ESPN, solely ESPN, no longer with CBS, that is going to make them a significant amount more money than they were making before. And they already were making a lot of money, remember?
Yeah, they were making a ton of money.
Greg Sankey is saying, oh, I'm leaving this up to Greg Sankey has big parent energy right now.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to let you decide what's the right thing to do. I'm not saying that you can't have your way. I'm just saying I'm going to let you get together in a room and you come up with the best solution for this. I'm just saying, during the pandemic, like when we actually needed the money and everything and tried to keep our lights on and we only played SEC games. Remember how cool that was? Remember how happy our television partners were that we weren't playing East Bemidji State? Remember how happy that we didn't have to see Alabama versus the Citadel? They were ecstatic. So guess what? We're getting all this money from this entity. Guess what we're going to do? Dance, monkey. Dance, little monkey. That's what you need to do right now. Get those little symbols out and start dancing. This makes you no different than the Big Ten. This makes you no different than the ACC.
Yeah.
I just loved his quotes about, well, our fans, they really enjoyed the pandemic. To the games they couldn't go to, Greg, where we weren't playing these games that weren't of the quality of our conference opponents. And it was like, yeah. And my favorite part was we ran, what did he say? Advanced analytics, I think he said. We ran advanced analytics that showed that your bowl eligibility numbers, they would not be affected significantly. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, how is he going to sell this to a group that doesn't want to do it other than to say that's what the money's for?
Exactly. That's exactly it. But that's not what the money is for, Joe. This is from Brett McMurphy. He put this quote out there from SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey. Money follows. It doesn't lead. When all you do is chase money, you make a lot of bad decisions. Now, this is when I just found out that Greg Sankey's got some sort of beef with Maryland. Because why is Maryland going to take a strain like this, guys? Like, man, what did they ever do to you? Because that exactly is a bad decision when you go chase the money. But that's exactly what this is about. It's all about the money. It's always been about the money. You talk to anybody within college athletics, and Greg Sankey has some of the biggest gopher, like, oh, what did you say? He is tuned into what other conferences are doing. They're tuned into being the leaders in all of college athletics. And if that comes down to how much money you make, well, then it absolutely matters to Greg Sankey. Let's not forget that you go back to pandemic rules when the ACC had technically two teams make the college football playoff because Notre Dame was technically a member of the ACC. I'm not making this up. They were legitimately upset. Greg Sankey was legitimately mad that the ACC now had a claim to something that the SEC had been using as a talking point for a couple of years. And this is going to be the same thing going forward for the college football playoff. So let's go from there, Joe, because that's what this is really about. There's this idea that let's take the money out of it, because you know that better conference games, more conference games means more inventory for the SEC network and ESPN, higher ratings, which then elevates the level of the package. This is no different from the ACC finally getting with the program and scrapping divisions, because what was that ultimately about? The ACC was trying to get better inventory for ESPN, better inventory for their own network. And you don't do that by having the same games within your conference, and you get less of NC State, Duke. You get less of Clemson, Virginia Tech, and the like. So you're telling me that the SEC doesn't look at this from the perspective of, oh, we can do Texas A&M and Texas more often now? Yes, that's what we want in terms of ratings. So the money will follow. In a way, I kind of agree with what Greg Sankey's saying. You go to 9 games, the money will eventually follow. The concern isn't about bowl eligibility. The concern seems to be coming from the college football playoff and whether or not a 3-loss SEC team can make the expanded field. So that's where I think things get a little tricky. There's a fear that by going to 9 conference games, you're basically inviting another loss, and that loss is going to keep you out of an expanded playoff field if you're Texas or Oklahoma or a fringe SEC team. I don't necessarily buy that, but that seems to be the argument that's taking place right now.
Well, don't forget, by adding Texas and Oklahoma too, they need to change their schedule model. Otherwise, the teams in the East will never play them unless you're a partner. And that's how they're set up right now, where they go long stretches where teams who are not together, like, don't ever play, like kind of like the NC State Duke deal under the old Atlantic and Coastal setup. And you can't add commodities like Texas and Oklahoma, and then have Georgia be like, okay, well, we'll see you in 2033 and then again in 2042. Right. How does that sound?
Yeah,
you can't
that's not good.
So
that's not.
They got to jumble up their schedule the same way that the ACC just did. The question is going to be, are they going to go to the 9th or not? It's an interesting misstep by the SEC if the reporting is true that contractually they don't get more money out of a 9th game. Now, contractually they do get more money by adding Texas and Oklahoma.
Yes.
So maybe there's a potato talking point there for Sankey in how that's going. But ultimately, why does this matter? You might be asking me and NC State or Carolina or even a Duke fan. This is why. A lot of the games, especially NC State, they've got a lot of games lined up with SEC opponents, South Carolina, Georgia, two in particular. Those games won't happen if you get to a 9th game. And the SEC had already put that in the language of the contracts with NC State that says if they go to 9, if the SEC schedule is expanded to 9 games, they can cancel this game without financial penalty. So this is obviously something they've been thinking about, planning for. And I think ultimately you're going to see more SEC football because, of course, it just means more.
It just means more.
We're moving on.
All right, Joe. So we got some new sponsors that we can shout out today on Ovies and Giglio. We got Hometown Realty. I know you met with Hometown Realty this past week, right?
Yeah, Barry Woodward, James Lipscomb, Hometown Realty. Listen, residential, commercial, rental, you name it. This, and you might be thinking, oh, Joe, where does this Clayton? Oh, no, sir. Raleigh, Garner, Clayton, Selma, Atlantic Beach. They got more than 250 agents. They have 6 office locations. So buying, selling, commercial, you need a rental space, check them out. It's myhtr.com.
Do they have podcast spaces that we can rent? Is that part of their realty?
You know what? If there's a space, Barry can find it for you.
I'm sure they can. I'm sure they can. And then, I don't know, if you need some legal documents to go along with that, hammer things out, hammer out contracts, Whitaker and Hamer can help you out as well. Check out wh.lawyer. Give them a call at 919-772-7000. They got multiple offices across all the G's are covered, right? Right, Joe? All the G's?
Gastonia, Goldsboro, and of course, Garner. Yeah, you have a business that you're trying to sell. You have a home you're trying to sell. Family law, they do it all. Josh Whitaker, Joe Hamer, check them out again. It's pretty easy. wh.lawyer. We're actually going to check them out this week. This is a little bit of a tease here.
Yeah.
I think I have your radio career right. The first person you did an actual show with was Morgan Patrick.
Technically, the first person I did a show with was Gordon Miller on a Saturday morning, 7:00 in the morning extravaganza called House of Sport. But when I moved to weekdays, it was with Morgan Patrick. Yes, the old Morning Mojo.
I was going to say, so we're going to have a Morning Mojo reunion this week that I'm very much looking forward to, because Morgan actually does the Outlaw Lawyer podcast with Josh and Joe. So we'll be checking them out on Thursday. Look for that on our socials next week.
And finally, Mosquito Authority, Pest Authority, sponsoring Ovies and Giglio. At some point, although as I'm recording right now, the sun has come out. The sun does exist. The sun is actually. I think the sun exists during the week. It doesn't exist during weekends. I think it goes on vacation. It goes elsewhere on the weekends. The last couple of months. But with all the rain that we've been getting, and it's going to get hot, this is like clear mosquito breeding time. With all the moisture, you can take care of that with Mosquito Authority and Pest Authority. Check out bugsbite.com. And again, it goes beyond just mosquitoes, but right now is clear mosquito time. So you want to be wary of that. All right, joining us on the Heister Automotive Group hotline from the News and Observer, he is Luke DeCock, columnist. Luke, what's going on, man?
Good morning, fellas. Good to see you.
So how is as I lose my pen, how is your grit and determination going to change this offseason? Do you feel like you need to be a bit more of a pest when you talk about the Canes, along with the Canes needing a little bit of that this offseason to kind of get over the hump?
Not sure I can be any more of a pest talking about the Canes. It really isn't, to me. It isn't grit and determination. I actually think they have that. Here's the image that sticks with me. Every scrum of that Florida series, there's 9 guys getting together behind the net. A Florida player was grabbing the back of a Hurricanes jersey by the neck and dragging the Hurricanes player out of the scrum. The Hurricanes might have been in there, but other then Brent Burns cup checking Matthew Tkachuk, there was none of really any fighting back. I thought Burns cup checking Tkachuk was maybe the most important play of that game because it was the only time the entire series of Hurricanes actually fought back.
Yeah.
And the bunch of jerks need some jerks. They got too many nice guys. I don't think that they're soft. They don't play soft, but the playoffs are a battle, and you got to have some, sort of espionage in there to win. And the margins in this series were so small and so fine that, and I have this whole theory on officiating, whereas if you don't commit the big penalties, they will call you for the small penalties anyway.
Yeah.
And they won't call the other team because they're already calling the other team for the big penalties. Mm-hmm. So you look at, like, in game 3, Radko Gudas flat out elbows Sebastian Aho behind the play, doesn't get called for it. Sebastian Aho gets pissed off, goes down to the other end, gets called for a stick check. Like, the referees are going to get you. So you might as well get your money's worth because you're going to get called for high sticking. You're going to get called for puck over the glass. But if you don't elbow someone in the face and get away with it, or don't get away with it, they're going to get you for that stick check on the hands. Like the Islanders, would go out and commit felonies, and then the Hurricanes would get called for a hook in the neutral zone away from the play.
Yeah.
Even Jordan Stahl's penalty at the end of game 4. That's an offensive zone penalty in the final minute of an elimination playoff game. If the Hurricanes had been elbowing guys all game, that doesn't get called. And you say, okay, well, that's stupid, Luke, but that's playoff hockey.
It is.
And if you want to win in the playoffs, you have to do those things.
All right. So, and Luke DeCock joining us, News and Observer columnist. Is it that's not what that's not how the players are wired for the Carolina Hurricanes? Or, like, none of these guys are capable of doing it? Or is it just the way that Rod Brindamore wants to go about the system? But which one is it?
I mean, that's a little from column A, a little from column B. I mean, you saw Stefan Nason get pissed off and drop the gloves with Eric Halla, and like literally 31 other teams applauded.
Sure.
And you see Sebastian Aho get fired up. You saw Burns.
Yeah.
I definitely their goal is to play between the whistles, and that's fine. I'm not saying they need to go out and cheap shot guys and run guys from behind, although
no,
got away with that. But you've got to just, in these scrums and things, you got to have a little more snarl. You got to have a little more bite. You got to stand up for yourself. And I think that's what's missing here is they don't have enough guys who on this team does the other team hate? I mean, it's all hugs, right? Like Jack Drury, really good player, skilled kid, just sweet, just cute as a button. Just a sweet kid out there getting cross-checked into the ground, pile drive by Radko Gudas with no call. Sebastian Aho's fiery. There's no question about that. But I think there's, and Jordan Stahl occasionally gets angry, but, he seems to sublimate it all.
Yeah.
And, it's just, Jacob Slavin, Brett Pesce can be a little mean, but they have a lot of really good players who are really nice guys. And that's great for chemistry. It's great for the room. But I think when you get out there on the ice in the playoffs, it's great for 82 games. But when you get out there on the ice in the playoffs, you got to have some guys who are tough to play against. Hurricanes are tough to play against because they forecheck you and they get on you and they force you into mistakes, although they didn't against Florida. But you need to have some guys who are tough to play against. Quite frankly, they need someone, not Eric Halla, but someone like Eric Halla that the other team hates. Brad Marchand. The Bruins have like 9 of those guys who are always shoving you in the chest and getting in your way. And they need a little more of that because they're at a point where, look, they were one of the 2 to 3 best teams in the league this year. They reached the conference finals. They lost 4 one-goal games that could have gone either way and really lost the series in the third period of game 1 and the first period of game 2 when they didn't capitalize on their massive advantage. But when you get into those little fine margins, sometimes it's not having the more skilled player or having the better power play. Sometimes it's baiting the other team into a penalty. Sometimes it's getting away with stuff. And I think, when you get to the point where you're one of the best teams in hockey, you have to start looking at what are we missing? Why haven't we gotten over the top? And to me, skill's not the issue. Leadership isn't the issue. Character isn't the issue. Grit and determination aren't the issue. To me, it's that one thing they're missing is a little Snydery.
Mm-hmm. You there, Joe? No, I guess Joe.
That met with less.
Yeah, I was going to say I didn't know Joe had checked out there. I have no idea.
No, I'm back. I'm laughing because if they get Eric Halla back, Well, then who are they going to beat in the playoffs next year? They might not win a playoff series because the last
Yeah.
3
No,
years they've been able to eliminate him.
Not Eric Hall.
Not Eric Hall.
Okay.
Like Eric Hall.
Someone that other teams hate as much as Eric Hall, but presumably a better player who fits better in the row.
But that's who you know the Canes are guaranteed to beat in the playoffs. Like, which team is Eric Hall? Oh, okay. The Canes will definitely beat that team.
Don't have to worry about that.
You wrote about this though, Luke, and next year is the big kind of crucible for the franchise with the players that whose contracts will be up. I am curious, the two big ones that stand out to me for this year. Curious, just your take on what do you think they'll do with Freddie and/or in goal? Is it Kochekov's time? And then with Jordan Staal, is it possible to get him back at a better rate than what they were paying him?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Staal thing is he wants to come back. I think they want him back. His role is going to be reduced. That just happens with age, and they can't afford to pay him what he's making now. I mean, and keep this team together. So, if this were a simple deal, it would have happened in January. It's going to be a negotiation. They've been through it before. Jimmy went through it every summer with Glenn Wesley.
Yeah.
I think it'll work out in the end because it makes too much sense for him to be here for both sides. But, you got to remember, this is what Rod Brindamore went through at the end of his career. And it got really ugly at the end. People forget that the transition to Eric Staal as captain was basically forced by Jimmy and sort of abetted by Paul Maurice, which is one reason why there weren't a lot of really nice words coming out of Rod Brindamore's mouth about how much he learned from Paul Maurice. There are still some hurt feelings there. So Rod Brindamore, of all people, is going to understand how to manage this transition to whatever the next phase of Jordan Staal's career is.
Well, okay, there's a focus on Jordan Staal, which I get, but whereas with Rod Brindamore to Eric Staal, there was a clear line of where things were going. What is the next leadership group for this team?
Sebastian Aho.
But what's his contract situation going to be? Because you got to remember, that's the part that I'm most fascinated by. They got one more year with Sebastian Aho. Are they going to be comfortable paying what it's likely going to take to pay Sebastian Aho without Montreal swooping in and making it easy for you?
Yes, and here's why. When we talk about having 1 year left on the core, we'll circle back to the goaltenders in a second.
Okay.
Part of the reason is it's not that these guys are all going to walk. It's that there are a couple no-brainers that you have to re-sign and take your medicine. And one of those is going to be Sebastian Aho because he is the future of this team as a leader and as a player. I don't know that he's going to be a mega star. I think it's pretty clear at this point that he's a very good player and maybe not a great player, but he is the next captain of this team. And he is an unbelievable competitor. So I think that's going to happen. Now, to do that, you got to find, this is a cap team now. People are used to all the years when they spent $22 million. This is a team that has to account for every nickel now because they are right at the cap. And they're not going to have Max Pacioretty's contract to play around with, which ended up being sort of a giant chunk of wiggle room. So Aho's contract is going to mean probably that someone else has to go.
Yeah.
But I do think the way the roster is currently constructed, that's something that you can manage if you're willing to make a couple moves that are going to be a little unpopular this summer. One way you manage that is by having Peter Kochetkov play 40 games at $2 million a year. So the question is, who's the best fit to share that spot with Kochetkov and mentor him? That may be Antti Raanta. That may be Frederick Anderson. That may be someone from outside because both Anderson and Raanta are up. You have the option of going a different direction. Freddie, I think, was great in the playoffs. He was great in the regular season last year, but he's getting up in age. And he's got some sort of chronic injuries that we saw in the first round that make him slightly less reliable than he might have been when he came here. And when you look at Raanta, there's so many things to like about Antti Raanta. Reliability is not one of them. So if Raanta is going to be your number two, you need a number three somewhere. So Kochetkov doesn't end up playing 60 games. So, but when these things, like this is how it is. These things are all interlocked. Yeah. Kochetkov's contract allows you to do other things because he's got another 3 years at $2 million. If he ends up being your number one in 2 years at $2 million, and you can bring in a backup making $2 million, now you have a ton of flexibility. But that's putting a lot on Peter Kochetkov. And I think this year is going to be a really interesting experiment to see how he handles that increase in workload. But I don't think you can go into it saying this kid's going to play 60 games. He might, but I think you have to plan that he won't. So, yeah, Joe, to your question originally, which one of those guys or someone new? I mean, I think that's an open question. It would not shock me if they ended up bringing in someone from outside, whether by trade or, free agency because they think that's going to be a better fit with Kochetkov, as opposed to the previous sort of goaltending regime where you're looking for how well Anderson and Ronta fit together, which they did. Ronta not having the need to play all the time and was so good in the room. And then Anderson, who had so much to prove coming from Toronto, and to me did. I don't think Freddie has anything left to prove at this point.
Well, could Mitch Marner do all those things, play goal as well, to mentor Peter Kochetkov? Because apparently, if you believe Toronto Twitter right now, I believe the Canes have to give up about half the roster just to get him, right? Isn't that where we're at right now? And I think Rod Brindamore is part of that deal.
Yeah,
he's got to go coach Toronto.
Coach the Leafs, yeah. Seth Jarvis, Marty Necas, Sebastian Aho. I think it's a pretty good deal if you think Mitch Marner can play 4 positions. Now,
sure, right. I mean, but I do love the unhinged trade demands that come out this time of the year.
Yeah, and look, there are going to be moves available for the Hurricanes to make. I mean, I really honestly believe with a year left to go on Teuvo Teravainen's contract, they're going to move him this summer because he's going to have more value now. And I don't think, looking at their salary cap situation in 2 years, they can give Teravainen the money that he's going to get on the open market or even with a hometown discount. So I think we're looking at the end of his time with the Hurricanes this summer. Maybe not. I thought the same thing about Justin Falk in 2018, and he came back and had a great year, but his contract situation was a little different. So, I think there are moves out there. I mean, you look at last summer, they had a chance. It didn't work because the Flames wanted different pieces. But you think about it now, if you traded Marty Necas and a prospect and a first-round pick for Matthew Tkachuk, that becomes a different argument. And then they end up getting Pacioretty anyway, and then he never plays. So
right,
there's all kinds of things. There's going to be opportunities this summer. I don't think Mitch Marner is going to be one of them, or Nylander, or I don't think John Tavares is waiving his no trade clause to come here, unless he secretly had Hurricanes or Whalers pajamas. But there's going to be moves out there. There's going to be players available. Adam Henrique is a guy they looked at the deadline. Now he's healthy again. Maybe it's someone like that. But there are going to be moves out there that the Hurricanes can make, some of which aren't going to be super popular. But I think they've got to look at that. The stuff we talked about earlier in terms of personality, and that stuff you can do on the fourth line. I mean, look, Steppen's probably gone. Paul Stastny's probably gone. You're going to have options to bring in guys. I think Mackenzie Eckert earned a spot for next year, to be honest. I mean, I think that's the kind of energy forward that you need on your fourth line, who can jump up in a pinch. Doesn't have a ton of skill, looks like, but can go hit people. They were a better team in the games that McEachern played. Jesse Puljujarvi, he'll end up playing in the KHL or someplace, maybe go play in the Afghanistan League with Tracy Smith. But there's not a lot of room out there on the top of the roster to make a bunch of changes. But I think that fourth line, you could bring in some guys who have a little snarl to them and sort of change the personality of your team, as long as they fit the way that the Hurricanes want to play.
Luke DeCock, News and Observer columnist. We appreciate the time, man. I'm with you. The Canes do need to find finishers, somebody that has a little bit of a pest to them, somebody that gets under your skin. To your point about how officiating works out, officiating is pretty much the same everywhere. Once you get to the playoffs, it really does become a test of what can you get away with. And the officials will probably even that thing up. But we will talk to you later as we get into some interesting offseason moves. I know Rod Brindamore and Don Waddell are going to have some exit stuff this week as well. So it should be interesting.
Yeah, and we got to this whole conversation without talking about college baseball. Thank you so much, guys.
What, you don't want to break down RPI? You don't want to live in the 1990s and obsess over RPI? Everybody else has moved on from RPI.
I will say this. I do think Campbell got screwed, and I agree with Giglio's contention that even if the 80s aren't in the room when these things are being discussed, when their teams are being talked about, that the other 80s do not, and commissioners do not want to look that person in the eye when they walk back in the room. Like last year with basketball, if Carolina had been anywhere on the bubble, there's no way they get those other committee members are going to look Bubba in the eye walking back into that conference room and say, hey, it's kind of a coin flip, but we left your boys out.
Sorry about that. Yeah, and then you got to deal with it.
So Campbell should have hosted. If they, that's an example though of where college baseball is just wackadoo, because their proposal was to host in Fayetteville, and I'm sure that they were like, we'd rather just have Auburn host on campus and blah blah blah. Like college baseball, man, it's college baseball.
It's a weird. I try to understand college baseball. with the jamborees, and it's not really a tournament. It's just extra games to maybe pad your stats to get in. It's not a tournament, for heaven's sake. But regardless, that's another conversation for another day. All right, Luke, we'll talk to you later, man.
See you guys.
I know you brought this up as it relates to college baseball and the ADs and everything else. And you're right. There is an element there, Joe, that exists with these types of things. But I'll be the first one to tell you when it comes to college baseball that I don't pretend to know what a committee is looking at, because the schedules are even more nuts than a college basketball schedule in terms of, a Ken Pom and everything else. I don't pretend to understand the dynamics going in. I don't envy the committee of having to do this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, listen, they have a metric. They go by the metric. Maybe they are a little too slavish to it. I'm curious, though, the makeup of this committee. And I listen.
There's no ACC representation,
right?
I'm pretty sure there wasn't an ACC representation at all.
I hate to be that guy, but it's like, yesterday was Memorial Day, and it's like, there's a place to honor the people who have fought for our country and made our country what it is. And if we need to, go invade Normandy again, I want the Air Force and I want Army involved. But the ADs from Army and Air Force are on the NCAA baseball selection committee, as if they're like Abner Doubleday and like invented baseball or something. And it's like, okay, cool. We've got the airstrike covered. And if we need to get some troops into left field, we got it covered. I don't think we need Army and Air Force both on the selection committee. Correct me if I'm wrong here. Maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah.
But it's an odd makeup. And I had pointed out, Sherrod Clinkscales is the AD at Indiana State, former pitcher, played in the major leagues, obviously knows a lot about baseball, used to work at NC State for Debbie Yao, went out and is the AD at Indiana State now. I look at it and I go, okay, well, they're hosting, and I'm sure there's a metric that suggests that Indiana State should host, but it's impossible for me to divorce the fact that Clinkscales is on the committee and his school is hosting. His seemingly random school in Terre Haute, Indiana, is hosting. So let me check on Aaron Fitt for us.
Yeah, we'll get to that. We'll get to it in a second.
What's up next?
We're waiting for Aaron Fitt, D1 Baseball, to join us here on Ovies and Giglio. I did want to annoy Giglio even further. Did you know, Joe, that over this weekend, the possibility that Tom Brady could unretire again is looming over another NFL offseason? Are you excited for this? Are you excited for another offseason of speculation with Tom Brady? We got our Aaron Rodgers thing out. We're done. He's been hanging out at Taylor Swift shows. He's enjoying New York. Good for him. He's showing up to OTAs because he's recommitted. So we need a new obsession, a new speculative game to play. And Tom Brady coming through like he always did. That's why he's the GOAT, man. He is the GOAT at making the speculation industry work in an NFL offseason. So here's what's going on. Jimmy Garoppolo and his health status, a little more complicated than the Raiders anticipated. Or did they anticipate it? According to multiple reports, Joe, the Raiders have clauses in the contract with Garoppolo that if his foot surgery did not clear the way they thought it was going to clear, that they could find their way out of it. It just so happens that Tom Brady is in the process of joining the Raiders as a minor owner, like a glorified season ticket holder. He's not really going to be buying up a bunch of the Raiders to the point where he's making true decisions. It's kind of like more of a figurehead type thing, part of the group. So while this is taking place, the speculation has started to come together that Brady would go to a ready-made team in the Raiders, like he went to a ready-made team with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and have one other go at it with his guy, McDaniels. So
Josh McDaniels. Yeah.
Josh McDaniels has ties back to his time in New England. So that's where we're at with the Tom Brady speculation. Complicating matters even further, though, is when the ownership stake goes through. If Tom Brady is approved to join the ownership group with the Raiders, it then becomes an ownership decision to let Tom Brady get on the roster. There's competitive reasons to keep him out of that. The owners would literally have to vote to be okay with Tom Brady being on the roster as a partial owner. So keep an eye on whether or not this ownership deal with Tom Brady and the Raiders goes through. The longer it goes on, the more the speculation is going to be that he would come out of retirement and play for the Raiders if Jimmy Garoppolo's foot is not good to go. I love it here, Joe. I love the Tom Brady speculation. The guy cannot quit. He cannot quit. What's it to him now? He's a free man anyway. The whole thing with him and Giselle's done. He can completely live his divorced dad life.
He gave up a life with Giselle to go win 8 games with a terrible Tampa team. That's all you need to know about Tom Brady.
Yeah.
So yes, when he retired, we had a full heaping scoop of skepticism that this would be the final, because you and I are in total agreement, and Aaron Fitt is going to join us. He's a fake Boston fan. I can't stand Fitzy. All of it. I hate all of his teams. I'm trying to get that out right now. I don't know if he could hear us
Get it out
yet,
of the way.
but
he can.
We said when he retired that, remember, the best thing that ever happened to him was the 4-game suspension, the year of the Super Bowl beating Atlanta, because he was fresh as a daisy, especially now that he doesn't have to play in the New England winters. I'll find us a spot where you could bet on if Tom Brady will take an NFL snap this season, and I will funnel all of our advertising money onto that card.
Joining us on the Houston Automotive Group hotline from D1 Baseball, it's Aaron Fitt. I did not know this about you, Fitt. I did not realize you were a quote-unquote fake Boston fan. Is this true?
I'm a Bucks fan, guys. I don't know what he's talking about. lifelong Bucks fan. You know, Vinny Testaverde was my guy growing up.
Got that creamsicle.
Yeah, listen. I'm very excited about the Gabbert era. So that's where I stand.
Fair enough. How excited are you to write about RPI coming out of a selection committee? I feel like, and Aaron is going to explain this to I'm 5 years old, because I do feel that the selection committee and the job that they have to fill out an NCAA baseball tournament is way more difficult than what the basketball folks have to do in terms of schedule and what metrics they use, who gets to host, and everything else. But I could tell on your website right out of the gate, most of the controversy or most of the discussion was about the use of RPI. So what is going on here? Why are they using a metric that most people have moved on from in the modern era?
Yeah, and that's exactly the point. Is of what I wrote yesterday is it's the reason this is a topic now, because it's a topic every year. Nobody, the RPI has been unpopular for decades, right? But we have an actual committee chairman who has said it publicly, like, hey, the system doesn't really work that well. It favors teams that are geographically based in the Southeast, and it encourages teams to cancel games down the stretch, because you're better off not playing Northwest Louisiana State on a Tuesday than you are beating them. And so that's a problem when you're incentivized to cancel games, because even if you win, it hurts you. And so, it illustrates the absurdity of the system. We've had a lot of this happening now. The last couple of years, coaches have figured out how to game the system a little bit. And, I don't blame them. I mean, if this is going to hurt you. If you play this game and you win it, it's going to hurt your chances to make the postseason. Why wouldn't you cancel it?
Yeah.
And so the chairman, John Cohen, the Auburn athletic director, has said all this publicly. And when he took over last summer, he made it clear that he wanted to kind of reform the process, and he was going to do things differently, and he's going to, really change things up. And then yesterday in the conference call, he's talking about the same stuff. Like, we really need to change this stuff. But like, he hadn't done anything. That's my problem. He hasn't done anything, and his term ends in August, and he's going to pass the baton and say, all right, well, hope the next guy does something. We really need to look at this. But like, how about we actually get some bright minds in the room, some people who know something about math and actually do something? I mean, have we done that? Have we bothered to actually get a group together to study this stuff and come up with a better system? That's all I'm asking. I don't know the answer. I'm not a math guy.
It's too much. That's too much.
It's missing.
That is too much
in baseball. First of all, Aaron Fitt, D1Baseball.com, joining us on the Houston Automotive Group hotline. If you follow college baseball at all, you know who Aaron Fitt is. He does tremendous work. I saw so much on my Twitter feed of D1 Baseball. And even when I saw Elliot Avent the day after I got fired, he's like, well, he goes, Fitt has us in. I go, Fitt had you in last year, man. Would you stop listening to Fitt? And lo and behold, look at you getting things right on Selection Monday. I'm very happy for you. But you know what's missing? You need to be the Ken Pom of baseball, of college baseball. Yeah. You need to be the A. Nolan. We need a Fitz magic metric. That's what we need.
Well, I problem is I don't know anything about math, so that is a problem. I'm not saying I'm the solution. I'm just saying there has to be a better solution.
There
than what we
has
have
to
right
be a
now.
solution. Well, why isn't there a baseball Ken Palm? Why haven't the metrics on baseball improved?
I mean, there's stuff out there. There's something called the ISR that this website called boydsworld.com came up with years ago that
Mhm.
I think does a better job. There's something called ELO that Warren Nolan came up with. Again, not a math guy. Don't know if those things are good or not. I know what we have right now. I know how the RPI works, and it's that doesn't work. And so, hopefully we can give us something better.
Fitz, I'm ecstatic that it's Campbell, it's South Carolina all together. I just feel like it's in the wrong location. Can you just explain why Campbell got jobbed? And is this as simple as there are no hotels in Bowie's Creek, or is there more to this? Or is it that Sherrod Clinkscales is on the committee and Campbell's AD is not? Like, help me out here on how Campbell is not one of the hosts here after the season that they had.
Yeah, they deserved it. I thought so too. I mean, we had them as one of our 16 hosts in our final projection, and they were going to host in Fayetteville at the minor league park. So it's not a matter of facilities or Bowie's Creek. I mean, who wouldn't want to take a trip to Fayetteville this time of year? Lovely town. But look at Fayetteville catching strays from Fitt right here on a Monday morning.
Jeez, Aaron,
Two
man.
Fayettevilles.
Come on.
Two Fayettevilles hosting.
It's my wife's hometown, by the way. I can take shots. If you will. Listen, South Carolina is the team that I thought was a surprise host. I mean, they really melted down late in the year. They went 4-11 down the stretch. They had some great wins. They went 8-7 against the top 8 national seeds. I think that carried a lot of weight with the committee. But boy, they really are not the same team that they were in the first half when they were dominating. And so you're right. I think we got the right teams together. I mean, in our projection, we had Campbell hosting with South Carolina as the 2 and NC State as the 3, I think. That would make a lot of sense. But instead, South Carolina gets to host because, and I get it. I mean, it's the high-end wins. It's a top 10 RPI. You can make a case for Campbell over like an Indiana State. They had much better quality wins. I mean, that's the thing that separates them. They were 9-5 against the top 50. Indiana State was 2-9. That's pretty stark. But like you said, Clinkscales on the committee, a factor. Top 10 RPI for Indiana State. I mean, as we see, RPI has been a crutch for this committee for a long time. So those are factors. And hey, Indiana State had a great year. I mean, if you win your regular season and your conference tournament, and they were just red hot the entire last 10 weeks of the season. I mean, something like 32-4, some crazy thing. I mean, they really, really played great. So I don't begrudge Indiana State hosting.
Aaron Fitt, D1 Baseball, joining us here on Ovies and Giglio. The NCAA tournament is ready to go. The brackets came out. They do it like over 2 days, which is always a cool thing. All right, we'll close on this. We'll go on the top end and the historic season that Wake Forest put together, and then what always tends to happen in the NCAA baseball tournament, a team that you don't expect that might go on some sort of magical run, and you have to guess it for us. So kind of like in context, I mean, we hear about State plenty. We know North Carolina's program. We know what they've been trying to build over at Duke. This Wake Forest baseball season seems to have caught people by surprise in how, I mean, good, but not like this good. Nobody could have expected the year that they had, right?
Yeah. I mean, we had them, I think, preseason number 6 in the country, the top team in the ACC. But no, we didn't expect them to, to be number 1 necessarily. I mean, and the thing is, I mean, Wake Forest, they hadn't really actually done it, like lived up to the hype before. We've hyped them up before. I mean, I've had to wear it repeatedly over the years for hyping up Wake Forest, and then they fall on their faces. But this team, and it's clearly it's the best team they've ever had. But I mean, it's just they're loaded in every way. They're so good, historically good. I mean, the fact that they led the nation in ERA in that bandbox of a home ballpark is stunning. It's just stunning, and they did it by a full run over the next best team in the Power 5 conference. I mean, it's absurd how good they pitched, and they got real power, and they played much better defense than they have in years past. They got it all going on, and the thing is now it's like, all right, we got to get to Omaha. We don't get to Omaha with this team, there's that pressure factor that's real. We saw Tennessee last year had a very, very, very similar season to Wake Forest. I mean, if you break those two teams down side by side, it's eerie how similar they are, how dominant they were in every way. Tennessee didn't get to Omaha. They lost in a home super regional. So I do think there's a little bit of extra weight when you've had such a great season, and especially with your program that it's not like you're a regular Omaha team. Like this kind of feels like your shot, It's like you got to make good on it, man. So we'll see how they handle that pressure.
And we're going to have another like last team in getting to Omaha type situation again. We're calling that.
Could have. I mean, listen, NC State, they weren't the last team in. They weren't even on the last four, actually, which is weird, by the way, because I actually thought their resume last year was stronger than their resume this year. But they had a higher RPI this year, which again shows you that's all the community really cares about. But NC State's dangerous. I'm just saying, like, that offense is real, man. It's a really, really deep position player group. If they just pitch enough, and you've seen it at times this year, like that's a team that could be like, not the last team in, but one of the last few that could really make a run. I could see it.
No. Which SEC team is going to win this thing?
I'm sorry.
You gave me Ole Miss early last year. I was very happy about that. I'm going back to the Fitzmagic well. Who do you got for me?
The problem is there was no last SEC team in this year because they were all like slam dunks. I think the lowest one is a 2 seed. So I mean, you can go ahead and place a bet on Tennessee if you want. They're one of the one of the only SEC teams that didn't host. They might be that team after the team thing. I could see it. I mean, because they're kind of flying under the radar. They've had a very uneven year. I don't know. I mean, I don't know that I'm going to pick. I'm probably not going to pick them to win the regional, but I've been burned by Clemson so many times over the years.
No,
like,
it's not
hosting
Clemson.
again.
Get out of here.
I'm just saying, like that's where
Stop.
I'm just saying that's where Tennessee went.
Stop.
Like, will Tennessee win that regional at Clemson? Is what I'm saying. I don't. I mean, they could.
If I can get that at plus money, I will take it. Yes.
Yeah, sure. I mean, Clemson's won 16 in a row, and I think they're I was skeptical.
That's cool.
Well, I was skeptical.
That's cool. We have decades of data that says this is not the ACC's tournament. Decades.
I mean,
like,
isn't there a coach that already knows what's going to happen in the baseball tournament anyway? I mean, that's the other baseball scandal that's been going on, right? I mean, we got who's going to be the team that gets in trouble, since that's been the MO this season in baseball. Yeah. Careful now. Yeah, careful.
Easy.
Aaron Fitt, D1 Baseball. Hey man, we appreciate the time and thank you for explaining, I pop online, I see everybody pissed off at the bracket. I'm thinking, okay, everybody's always mad at the bracket. With baseball, it felt a little bit differently. Now it makes a lot of sense. Appreciate it, man.
Hey, thanks for winding me up early on a Monday.
Let's go.
Monday,
it's better
Tuesday
than
morning.
It's Tuesday.
Tuesday
I don't even know what day it is. It's fine. Appreciate it, man. Take it easy. That's Aaron Fitt
for that.
D1 Baseball. Yes, you too. You do have a clock for that.
We're moving on.
All right, so shouts to I was going to go to Carolina Beach this weekend, but the weather absolutely stunk. But that doesn't mean there isn't things to do out in the heart of North Carolina. And they've been sponsoring us this first month of Ovies and Giglio, network for entrepreneurs in Wilmington. You can check them out online at NEWILM.com. It's where the river of innovation meets an ocean of possibilities. And Wilmington ranked number 1 as a startup ecosystem in the U.S., number 2 in the world. They've got startups that have had 3 successful exit events, including Untapped, which is a beer app that I would use back in the day. They did festivals and everything else. But yeah, if you didn't know this, Untapped came out of Wilmington. So again, check them out, NEWILM.com. And also shout out to the Butcher's Market. We had one of our listeners, I guess they had never done the steak and cheese sandwich before at the Butcher's Market. They didn't realize sandwiches were a thing. And we've been telling you about it. We've been telling you about the sandwiches. They took a picture like, yup, game changer, all in on the sandwiches at the Butcher's Market.
I need to find out if they make their own bread, because that's really what kind of sold it for me. That's key. 6 locations: Raleigh, Cary, Wake Forest, Holly Springs, and Wilmington. All of your weekend grilling needs. We got holiday parties, obviously, this last weekend. We got Father's Day coming up, graduation parties, you name it. They have unbelievable selection of meats and prepared foods for you. Go check them out. It's thebutchersmarkets.com.
Let's get to some Hey Joe questions as we wrap up today's show. It's brought to you by the Oakwood Pizza Box. Check them out in downtown Raleigh. You can give them a call at 919-594-1605 to get your to-go orders. And it goes beyond just pizza, too. They got like really good salads. The wine selection's really good as well. May I suggest the pizza wine, Lambrusca? Big fan. Anthony's opened my eyes to pizza wine. It's a little bubbly. Okay. It's a nice bubbly red.
Red bubbles.
Served cold.
Yeah.
Red bubbles, baby. Game changer for me when it comes to eating pizza. So if you want to give us some Hey Joe questions, all you got to do is use the hashtag Hey Joe. I'm still trying to figure out how to use YouTube in that, because I know not everybody's on the Bird app. Fine. Got it. But I do feel that there's probably other ways that you can send us some Hey Joe questions. I'm still in the process of figuring that out. I don't know. Maybe you can email us. All right. To Jay, Who had Caleb Martin leading the Heat to the NBA Finals on their bingo card? Certainly not you, Joe. Certainly not you.
Not the NBA Finals, but I was an early believer in Caleb Martin. I have two Caleb Martin stories that I will share with us when he was being recruited by NC State. I remember this was after the failed year of 13. Remember, NC State goes into that year number 6, and Mark Godfrey the year before had been to the Sweet 16. This team lost in Dayton, and it was a disappointing season. And I remember we were sitting in the Raleigh Times, I believe it or not, and Mark was telling me, he goes, we need more shooters. I know with Scott leaving, we need more shooters. And I'm bringing in a guy I think you're really going to like in Caleb Martin. And I'm like, holy smokes, this guy must be really good if he could shoot like Scott would. And he's like, yeah, but he's going to be better than Scott because he can dribble. And I said, oh, okay. I like that.
Wow.
So, and it was like,
all right,
he's got a twin. So I went to the NBA Top 100 camp, met Caleb and Cody Martin for the first time going into their senior years, and met their mom, Jenny Bennett, and they're a great story. And they get to NC State, and they were on the team that also made the Sweet 16. They were reserve players on that team. And I remember thinking, these guys play really, really hard. Caleb is obviously not Scott Wood, but he's got some potential. And Cody is a guy who does a little bit of everything. Both athletic, both played really, really hard. The next year they played a lot. Remember, that was the next year the bottom fell out a little bit on State. That was the Cat Barber team, if you don't remember it. And Caleb scored 11 points a game and 4 rebounds a game. Like he played 30 minutes a game. Cody played 25 a game. And I remember that December, one of their former teammates said to me, this is the 15-16 season. He says to me, the Twins are transferring. And I was like, what? And I even went to Mark and I said, the Twins are, and this was like early January. And I said, the Twins are leaving? And he was like, yeah, they're worried next year they're not going to play. And it's not just Caleb, it's Cody. And if Cody's unhappy, then Caleb's going to be unhappy. And I was just like, and I said to him, you realize, now this is the old transfer rules. You had to sit out a year. I said, you realize in 2 years, they're going to show up at like Marshall and they're going to win. They're definitely winning one NCAA tournament game, if not 2. I had the wrong school. They ended up at Nevada. And I had the wins wrong too. They ended up in the final 8. And obviously it's been a journey from there. But it's just the way that the game has changed and it's worked out as 3-and-D in the NBA's emphasis on length and guys who can shoot and guys who can defend the perimeter. As you saw, Caleb Martin drew a lot of the Jason Tatum assignment on the defensive side. Those are the kind of players. Yeah, they kind of fly under the radar, and maybe they don't have the big pop right away in their college success. But you got to give a lot of credit to Musselman too at Nevada. He's at Arkansas now. The way that he was able to showcase them and develop them in Nevada was really something else. So, and of course, anytime you talk about the Martins, Joe, got to talk about Bobby Lutz. Bobby Lutz, one of the original guys who recruited them to NC State, really kind of discovered them. It's actually also one of the reasons why they ended up leaving. Remember, Mark got rid of Bobby, and it was like, well, what are we going to do? So that was all part of it. But yeah, there could be any more games like that. We might need a special emergency Martin podcast. So.
Yeah, I was gonna say we do a 6-part on that.
A la Russell Wilson.
At what point did Mark Godfrey tell the Martin twins, son, or in this case, sons, plural?
I got Maverick rolling. I don't need you.
I don't need you, sons. So yeah, I was gonna say I can't. Well, in this case, because Tom O'Brien didn't have a Southern accent, but Mark Godfrey kind of does.
Yeah,
we have to give him a New York accent.
A straight accent, yeah,
just a straight it's like, hey, you want to play here? Forget about it. Get out the door. Mark Godfrey does not talk like that. But in the Martin twins story, that's true. But the last point on this, you just hit on it: development, right? And the development doesn't stop once you make the league. The development doesn't stop if you're somebody trying to grind out a roster spot like the Martin twins have. And Caleb Martin specifically. Spent time with, the Sioux Falls team with the Miami Heat, and their development goes a long way. And the players' drive too goes a long way towards the results that you see right now. That you commend the Heat organization for making that work. And the Hornets have tried to follow suit with their own development. It's not quite there yet, obviously, but That's how you are successful in the NBA. You get stories like this, like the Martin twins. All right, next on our Hey Joe extravaganza. This is from Mark Cuban. Got a personal question for everyone watching the Heats and Celts right now. Who's watching on a pirated stream? I'm curious how prevalent it is. I'm sorry. Is Mark Cuban now Narc Cuban? There was Narc Cuban was trending last night during this game because he asked this question. Now, Mark Cuban, as you know, Joe, is fascinated by how people are watching sports because remember, and you tried to do this with Tom Dundon, I'd be more than happy to watch Hurricanes games if you subsidize my Bally Sports. Well, Mark Cuban was doing that for like a hot minute. So he's kind of curious how people are watching this stuff. Well, it was on TNT. So for the most part, people were going to be able to watch it. But the fact that you even watch this, what's next? You going to ask for my social security number? Do you want to know my home address? You want my bank account? Mark, nobody's going to answer your question, dude. Nobody's going to answer your question like that. How are you watching this? How prevalent is it? Who? What? No. Did you watch it legally, Joe? Can you even hear me right now? Uh-oh. Did we lose Joe? I think we lost Joe. All right. We'll get to Joe. You blinked twice at me when you're finally back in the mix. All right. We will go to another Hey Joe question here. Oh, there you are. You're back. I didn't know where you went.
Mom's maiden name.
What's that? What's that? Oh, I can't. Oh, we're having problems here. All right. We'll close on this. Hey, Joe, what's the best water park to check out in the Carolinas? Do we even have water parks around here that aren't like the pool? There was a place. There was a place out there. Yeah, there's a place in the Outer Banks. There's a place in the Outer Banks that's called like H2OBX, which is out on the. I think it's on the sound side, and it's. Or not. I don't think I can. Now I can hear you. You're back. Hi, Joe. Uh-oh. We're having all sorts of technical problems now. Can you hear me, Joe? No, I can't hear me. It's fine. We're at the end of the show anyway. So this is why I'm looking forward to finding a studio space here in the near future. So we're just going to go ahead and wrap up the show now. We're already at the end of the show. Appreciate everybody listening. You can check us out wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button. Leave the comments. If you made it this far in the video, we appreciate that because it helps with the click-through rate and everything else. But so does leaving comments. So does interacting with the likes and everything else. So by all means, if you're a subscriber, keep engaging, and it helps us with our visibility. And shout out to everybody who's given us 5 stars, positive vibes only, on the podcast itself. That's going to wrap it up for today's edition of Ovies and Giglio. We will see you Wednesday.